Welcome back to Wellness Wave Radio. Thanks for tuning in this morning to ride the wave with us. Each week our goal is to give you at least one suggestion that will make your life a little better. My name's Phil George. I'm a clinical biochemist, a certified personal trainer, and a health coach. Please remember, everything we discuss on the show is for informational purposes only and should not be taken as medical advice. Always seek the guidance of your medical professional. So today I'm going to cover actually a local topic, but also has kind of like a global application. I don't know if you guys have seen, but there was a big, just a few days ago, a big ruckus about Indian Lake in Worcester. And what happened is a lot of people swim in this lake, and you have little kids swimming in it. You know, it's been really, really hot. And if you notice, even down Coast Pond, I'm assuming also here in Leicester, on different ponds, people are swimming in these ponds. And so anyway, Indian Lake, all of a sudden, they went in there, and these kids and adults, they were having rashes on their skin, and they were also having a lot of stomach problems, kids and adults. The other thing that they noticed that got them really concerned, a lot of dead fish were coming up on the shore, killing the fish. So obviously something's going on somewhere. So this is from the Telegram, Telegram and Gazette. So I'm basing everything on what they're telling me. I wasn't there. They had a big meeting. They wanted to bring somebody from the city council down there in Worcester to talk to these people. And again, from the reporter, what they said was, they said, well, what's going on? They had a big overgrowth of a lot of vegetation at Indian Lake. So somebody from Worcester, in their infinite wisdom, decided to spray what's called a herbicide. Now, probably the most well-known herbicide is glyphosate, which is Roundup. That's a generic name, Roundup. I don't know about you, but every time I check my email, I get a thing, have you been exposed to glyphosate? Contact the law firm. We'll take the case for free. They've already lost, not millions, billions of dollars in lawsuits. So they're willing to pay out this money because this herbicide, Roundup, glyphosate, is basically, it's everywhere. They spray it on everything. In fact, I'll give you a good example in terms of this herbicide. If you ever go around, you'll see some of these little yellow stickers stuck in the grass. It'll say, don't walk on this. And the reason for that is plants are living things. You know, they're alive, just like we are. Not as sophisticated as we are, but they're alive. If it's hurting the plant, there's a pretty good chance it's hurting you. I mean, you're not immune to it. In fact, one of the interesting things about Roundup, glyphosate, is when it was originally developed, it was developed as an antibiotic. In other words, to basically kill bacteria. Now, you have something in your gut called the microbiome, and that's really, really important. In fact, Hippocrates, the father of medicine, said all disease begins in the gut. If your gut's messed up, you're messed up. In fact, a lot of times what will happen, if you have to go on a long range of antibiotics, they'll give you what's called a probiotic. In other words, you're killing off all your good bacteria, and then you're going to reintroduce it again. So your gut bacteria is really, really important. A lot of people don't know, you guys may have heard of a neurotransmitter called serotonin, the feel-good hormone. I think it's anywhere between 70 and 90% of the serotonin that you make that makes you feel good basically comes out of your gut. It goes up, it's something called the vagal nerve, like a superhighway. They call it the gut-brain, basically access. It goes back and forth. The brain talks to the gut. It goes back and forth. A lot of people don't know that. So if you got what's called dysbiosis, you got not enough bacteria. You got the wrong kind of bacteria in your gut. It's going to maybe cause depression. Going to cause stomach upset. It's going to give you diarrhea. Constipation. All that stuff. So your gut is you're basically, the bacteria in your gut are really, really important. So again, this glyphosate Roundup is made to kill it. So you're exposed to this. So first of all, you're being exposed. It's messing up your gut. The other thing, I'm going to talk about this woman. Her name is Stephanie Seneff. In fact, I just read a couple of books from her. She is the head scientist at MIT. Arguably, probably, the biggest, most influential, colleges in the country, if not the world. And wrote a whole book on this, how dangerous it is in terms of not only messing up your gut. You'll see a lot of times, you used to have ads on TV. Have you come down with any type of a cancer, one specifically called a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and what will happen is basically, they believe it's caused by this Roundup. The other thing that they found out, people that work around agriculture a lot and they spray the stuff on it, they also come down with a lot of Parkinson's disease. I'm going to be giving a presentation actually, in about a month to a Parkinson's group. And when I deal with a client that has Parkinson's, the first thing I ask them, have you been around any kind of agriculture? Have you been close to places when these planes go over and they spray this poison on stuff? If it kills the plant and it kills the insect, it's going to over a period of time it could do some damage to you. So that's the skinny on the Roundup, the glyphosate. This particular weed killer that they used at Indian Lake was even more toxic than glyphosate. This actually, when you spray it on the plant, it kills the plant. So it's very, very powerful. Worse than glyphosate, in my opinion. And I worked in toxicology. That was one of the things I did when I worked in the hospital. So I know toxicology. Anyway, so they wanted to spraying it on there. What I found disturbing was this person from the city council, and I don't know if he's got any kind of background in science, but he said to the people, they got rashes, they got stomach aches, they got all kinds of issues. Oh, no, it's not caused by this particular herbicide. It's caused, and the fish are dying because they're lacking oxygen due to the weeds. Well, anybody that has a computer can type in the name. You can email me, philgeorge@charter.net. I'll send you the studies. You can just look it up, and it lists all the symptoms that you get from being exposed to this, especially swimming in it. So it's got skin rashes, upset stomach, a whole litany of things this long. So everything that they had is already listed. It's online. This is common knowledge. This is toxicology. So this guy is telling them, don't worry about it. Everything's great. I don't know. I'm just speculating. But I'm thinking that maybe the city's afraid of a lawsuit, because if they find out these people come down with cancer or something like that, and they wind up suing the city, putting this stuff in there, and they should at very least have a sign, don't swim in here because it's toxic, And if I were there and my kids were in there, well, first of all, if I see dead fish coming up on the shore, I'm not going there. I'm not going in there. What I would say to him, okay, why don't you come back with your bathing suit, and why don't you go in the water, okay, and see what he does. So I don't know why they're telling them, these people, this stuff, that everything's wonderful, because it's not wonderful. The reason I'm telling you this, hopefully that Lester is more enlightened than Worcester is, and they know enough not to spray or put toxins in the water. So somebody that was in this particular thing at Indian Lake, and they were talking to them. They were saying, well, isn't there another way to get rid of all these overgrown plants? And he said, well, we'd have to go in there with something, and it's really expensive, and it's blah blah blah. But you know what is your health worth? I mean, what is the health of your constituents worth? If I'm a city councilor, my number one job is to make sure that you're safe and you're healthy. That's what's more important than everybody's health. So in my opinion, they're dropping the ball on that one. The other issue is, it depends on where you spend your money. Now, you got you got a small business, you got a household. You make a decision on where you're going to spend your money. Okay, so I'm assuming the first thing you're doing, you're paying your taxes, otherwise they're going to come after you. I'm assuming you're paying your mortgage, you're paying your insurance. You're paying your phone bill. These are things you have to have, your electricity bill. You pay these first. Everything after that is disposable, what they call disposable income. So I just saw on Worcester, on Mill Street, and this goes by Coast Pond. Now what they've done, they've spent millions of dollars on this thing. They got bike lanes in there, they get this, they get that. saw in the paper that now they want to do something else to Mill Street. So now they're going to spend, I thought it was 1 or 2.5 million. That's with an M. That's a lot of money. And one of the city councilors said, why are we spending all this money? We've already spent a fortune on this road to begin with. And the town manager said to them, well, that 1 or 2 million dollars is not going to go to any construction. It's going to go to a research company to figure out what kind of construction we're going to do, okay? So that's $1 or $2 million. And I don't know how much it's going to cost to go to Indian Lake and to get rid of those weeds naturally without putting a poison on them and poisoning everybody else. But if I were a city councilor, I would say instead of spending the money on looking at more stuff we can do on Mill Street, maybe we could spend that money on cleaning up this lake and taking care of people. Again, you have to have your priorities. You know what I'm saying? You're going to have priorities on this. Your health is the most important thing. I know they have meetings in Leicester. They have city council meetings and stuff like that. Where are we going to spend our money? Where are we going to spend our money? And again, you have to have your priorities. And I think, I don't know if that were me or I would have the correct English is, I'd go down there and I'd be raising a ruckus and say, what are you guys doing? Instead of looking at what more bike lanes you want to put on Mill Street, maybe you should be spending this money cleaning this stuff up. So there's a lot of stuff that you can basically do with that money that I think is a lot better than worrying about another bike lane. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So getting back into glyphosate, the most it's sprayed on everything. So there's an expression in toxicology. It means it's called dose makes the poison. So in other words, it's not necessarily what the toxin you're getting. It's the exposure over a period of time. One of my things I talk a lot about on my shows. In fact, you can email me philgeorge@charter.net if you have any questions about anything, or if you want another topic covered, somewhere down the road. One of the things I talk a lot about is mercury poisoning. So Dr. Oz, now he's in the government, he had mercury poisoning. Tony Robbins, the big motivational speaker, he had mercury poisoning. Mercury poisoning is a nasty thing. Your body is really, really smart, and let me jump ahead. You're going to be really, really careful with a tuna fish and swordfish. They're what they call predatory fishes. So I think it's no surprise that our oceans are basically polluted. We got what happens, all the waste from oil and stuff like that going in the ocean, and a lot of that there's mercury in the ocean. You have a lot of plastics in the ocean. You probably heard about the plastic toxicity. People are basically, their body is full of plastics. In fact, I had, I'm not speaking for Dr. Eddie Arus, he was on the show here. He's one of the top vascular surgeons in New England. And what happens, he goes in there with people with like a deep vein thrombosis and stuff like that, where you get clots. And one of the problems with that, with this deep vein thrombosis, it gets down in your leg. If it gets loose, goes up and get into your heart, you have a heart attack, gets into your brain, you got a stroke. So that's what he does. So he goes in there and he does the roto-rooter on these guys, where he basically goes in there and cleans out the clot. What they're finding now with people that have clots in the heart attack, this goes back to a little bit to inorganic chemistry. If you can have a crystal, you need something in the center basically to go around it, to form around it. So the speculation is these plastics that we're taking in, they're everywhere. It forms a kernel in which basically all the cholesterol forms around, and it causes a clot in your heart. So that's what they're thinking. So they're finding now, when people like Dr. Roos go in there and they go into they're finding out inside that clot is plastic particles. So the ocean has a ton of plastic in it. They've actually found in the ocean, they call plastic islands, whole islands, just because the plastic, coagulates together. They're finding plastic. So what happens is the little fish, they go over there and they're eating the metals, they're eating the mercury, and they're eating the plastic. The little fish the bigger fish eats the little fish, it goes up and up. So the top of the chain are tuna and swordfish. So they're eating a lot of this stuff. What happens is the mercury and the plastics get absorbed into the tuna and the swordfish. When I first met my wife, the first thing that, and I've known this for years, the first, she loved swordfish, swordfish steaks. I said, honey, you can't be eating swordfish. And I went through the whole thing, and now she's not eating swordfish anymore. But tuna is another one. And what happens, a tuna is in cans. Now, again, dose makes the poison. I knew somebody, he was an electrician, he came down with mercury poisoning, nasty stuff. What happened to him was he was obese, he was overweight, and he decided to go on a tuna fish diet because it's high in protein and low in calories. And he came down with mercury poisoning. The issue is with a can of mercury, it is a can of mercury, with a can of tuna fish, they're not measuring. They don't tell you how many parts per million mercury is in that particular can. Maybe the tuna that they got out of there, basically, maybe this poor tuna was loaded with mercury. Maybe he had 1,000 parts per million of mercury. This tuna has 500 parts per mercury. This is basically Russian roulette. You don't know how much mercury is in there. If you guys ever watched Shark Tank, they had an interesting pitch, and they called it clean tuna. And what they did is before they cut up the tuna fish, they would run a mercury detector over them, and they could see how much mercury parts per million or whatever is in there, and they could say this has only got so many parts per million. I don't know if this ever took off, the clean tuna, but you don't know. The other thing they're telling now women that are pregnant, because what happens is if you're pregnant and you get mercury, it's going to cross the placental barrier and get into the fetus. Mercury has a terrible effect on your brain. So you're going to have your child born that's probably not going to come in with a full deck, if you know what I mean, because they got mercury in the brain. A little bit of biochemistry. So the way mercury works is your body is really, really smart. What it doesn't want to do, it doesn't want to overload any particular organ in your body with mercury. So what it'll do, it'll take a little bit of mercury, it'll put it in your liver. And then as your liver gets filled up, because your liver is a big detox organ, but it's very, very hard to detox from mercury. The way they detox from mercury is what they do is they do something called chelation. So what they'll do is, you guys know about IVs, they'll run an IV in you, the blood will go up, it'll go through a filtering process. It's called chelation. So mercury, if I remember correctly, it's an inorganic, actually there's organic and inorganic types of mercury, but whatever it is, I believe mercury is they call a double cation, 2 positive charges. I could be wrong on that, but it's been a long time since I had inorganic chemistry. They'll find something called an anion with a negative charge, and negative and positive go together, and it'll bind together, and it'll pull that mercury out of your blood. Then when the blood is cleared, then it puts it back in. So they run it through until they get the mercury out of your body. But that's an expensive proposition. There's other ways of doing it. They have other things you can take, and hopefully it'll basically bind to it. Other way you can do is with a sauna, because when you sweat, it's a good way to sweat out the mercury. They can also do, if you want to know if you've been exposed to mercury, it gets a little tricky, because again, even if they look at the mercury in your blood, remember most of that mercury is not floating around, free floating in it's being put in organs. So it puts it into your liver first. When the body says, "Oh, I got too much mercury in the liver," then it'll start putting it in different places. It can put it in your heart. It can put it in your brain. It's going to want to put it in what they call, fat-intense organs. So your liver's fatty, your brain's got a ton of cholesterol, your brain is pretty fatty. In fact, anybody calls you a fathead, say thank you, because you got a lot of good cholesterol in your brain. So it's going to put it in the fatty parts, and that's where it gets stored. It gets stored in the fat. It gets stored in your fat cells. If we all have fat, a lot of fat. I'm pretty lean, but I still have a decent amount of fat. It'll store it in the fat cells. So what'll happen is if you go into a major detox, What will happen is if you start liberating all that mercury out of your body, you'll come down with something called a Herxheimer reaction. So what will happen is, let's say you go into a detox. There's all different types of detox protocols. And you don't feel that good to begin with, but you know you got mercury toxicity. You take this, and all of a sudden you feel awful. What happens is called a Herxheimer reaction. What it means is when you liberate all these mercuries or any toxin from your body, it floods your blood with these toxins because it's coming out. It was stored in your fat. Now it's coming out. It's called a Herxheimer reaction. That's why if you're going to do some type of a detox, you have to know what you're doing. You can't just go in there and just detox. You're going to detox a little bit at a time, because one of your key organs for detoxing is your liver and your kidneys. If you overload those, it's like if you're running like any kind of a filter. If you overload the filter gets clogged up, and that's not good. So you don't want to overload your detox organs. Again, your liver and your kidneys, because you could damage them. So you're going to be careful. You're going to be careful what you're doing with that. So that's the problem again with in terms of tuna and swordfish. You're going to be careful. Our oceans are polluted. Well, actually, there's three major toxins in there. We got the mercury, we got the plastic. But if you remember, a couple of years ago, the Fukushima, whatever, power plant in Japan had a leak, and it leaked radioactive material into the ocean. And it doesn't stay in one place; it's going to spread. So a lot of these fish could also have these radiation in them too. So those aren't a good thing. Fish are really good for you, but I highly recommend, if you're going to eat fish, eat salmon. Salmon is a freshwater fish pretty much, and it's pretty clean, not many toxins in it. But you're going to be careful with salmon, because salmon, they call industrial salmon, where they put all these salmon into this big pen and they feed them crap. They feed them corn and stuff like that. Going back to the glyphosate Roundup, so remember what happens, they're spraying this glyphosate, this Roundup, on all these plants, because what they want is, they don't want the weeds there and they don't want the insects in there. So they're going to kill it off. But it gets into the different, especially wheat. Wheat and corn are the big things that they spray glyphosate with, because both wheat and corn are subsidized by the government, so they want to produce a lot of it. But they don't want a lot of plants, they don't want a lot of insects, so they'll spray the crap out of the stuff. So when you're eating anything that is not organic with wheat in it, you're getting exposed. You're getting exposed to the glyphosate, to the Roundup. It's a really cheap form, corn and wheat. Okay, so what they'll do is with these industrial raised salmon, instead of giving them what they normally eat, bugs and stuff, they're going to give them this wheat, and they'll eat that. So those fish get contaminated with this Roundup. So if you're eating farm-raised salmon, they're eating bad stuff. Whatever that fish eats, you eat. Okay, this goes through with cows and chickens and everything else. We'll get into that in a second. So you're going to be careful. So you want to get free swimming salmon, from Alaska. In fact, if you email me, philgeorge@charter.net, I subscribe. I get it delivered to my house. It's from Alaska. So you get the fishermen going out there. They're catching the healthy salmon. And you can get that delivered right to you. So I get that delivered. I have salmon. I'd say at least once a week, maybe twice a week. Salmon is really good for you. It has something called omega-3s in there. Omega-3 is really good, because what omega-3 does, it coats all of the lining in terms of your nervous system, because your nervous system is basically lined with this fat layer, and so you want the good fat in there. There's two basic types of fat. You got omega-3, you got omega-6. Omega-6 is still an essential omega, but it's supposed to be a 1-to-1 ratio, one part omega-3 to one part omega-6. What happens, unfortunately, in the American diet, we have a lot more omega-6 than we do omega-3, and that's very inflammatory. That's why you get a lot of aches and pains, because more than likely you're eating what's called the SAD diet. the standard American diet, to where you're getting a lot of omega-6, causes a lot of inflammation, can also cause inflammation in your arteries. So that's a big problem. You don't want that. So in fact, what I do is, I'm pretty crazy. What I do is I want to know my omega-3 to my omega-6 ratio. So there's this company, it's called Omega Quant. And what I do is every year or so, I'll send in a blood sample to them, and I get a feedback, and they break down my omega-6 to my omega-3 ratio to make sure that I'm in the right proportions. So we got 5 minutes left. Meg just told me. So that's one thing. But remember, with the in terms of the same thing with a chicken and with cows. Okay. So again, it's a lot cheaper, basically, for companies to put all these cows and all these chickens. If you've ever seen what they do to these poor chickens, they got them in a room this size, and they're all squished together, and they're feeding them the grains, and they're feeding them corn sprayed with glyphosate. So whatever.
I wanted to ask you a question.
Go ahead.
I'm not on the air, but you were talking about pesticides.
Yeah.
And how the city did it without the permission of the people. What about when they sprayed mosquitoes throughout Central Mass and never tell one person? 2 or 3 weeks ago they did it. We were outside on my deck, and I have an app that tells you where the planes are going, and you could see it. They were spraying for mosquitoes, never told one person. Is that right?
It didn't go on air?
No, it's on air.
Oh, good.
I want you to answer that
I'll address it. Okay. Obviously, pesticides are, if it hurts, mosquitoes are living things. In fact, mosquitoes are more like us than plants are, obviously, because they're more animate. But if they're spraying that stuff on you, especially saying, let's say you're outside, and let's say you got a drink in your hand, and it goes over and sprays, you're drinking that stuff. So again, I know they're afraid of the equine encephalitis and stuff like that. But again, you gotta be careful in terms of what's happening. The other big issue, again, with these herbicides, pesticides, insecticides, and stuff like that, again, dose makes the poison. So if you're a relatively healthy person, you're going to do much better than somebody that has what they call metabolic syndrome, where you got a bunch of stuff wrong with you. If your body's already on, I'll give you a good example. Let's just say you have a fish tank, and you really want to do is you want to be cleaning out that fish tank. If you just let that fish tank sit there, the fish are going to be defecating in that fish tank and stuff like that. That's why people normally have filters in there to clean it out. But what happens is with us, we have a way to detox. We got our liver and we got our kidneys. But what happens if you got too many toxins? If your liver's already overworked, and let's say you're a big drinker, okay, and you're drinking, and your liver's already trying to clear all the rest of this stuff, you got problems. So you want to be the healthier you are, basically, the better you're going to be able to detox from the stuff. We're living in a toxic soup. I got to wrap it up. Okay, email me, philgeorge@charter.net. Any questions about the stuff? If you want me to go out and give a presentation in one of your groups, I got my friend Kelly. We can come down there. We give a lot of presentations. And we'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in. One of the most common questions I'm asked as a biochemist and health coach is, what are the best supplements to take? Choosing supplements is a tricky business. Many companies have poor quality control and questionable ingredients. In the past, I had to send clients to several different websites. I am now able to offer one-stop shopping for all the quality brands I recommend, with no shipping cost and a lower price in most cases. Just email me, philgeorge@charter.net, for a free consult.